Okay, little creep, are you ready?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Okay, in this scene, the creature's gonna be sneaking up on you, and hey mates, we're just doing some screen test for my new movie. It's gonna be the greatest killer animal movie of all time.
About that, Captain Adam, are you totally sure about all this?
Of course I'm sure.
Well, I just don't think people are really gonna get it.
Why not? It's gonna be the greatest killer animal movie of all time.
Yeah, but it's a pet rock. I think you've gone too far this time. Suspension of disbelief is one thing, but this is asking way too much. I mean, a killer animal movie? It's not even an animal, it's a rock.
Oh, shucks. Don't worry about that. No one's ever gonna notice. It's all about the premise. And that reminds me, the world of killer animal movies is filled with all kinds of examples. Some believable, others not so much. It's a wide world of a subgenre of film. Isn't that right, VC Arnold?
VC Arnold, activated. And to answer your stupid question, yes, killer animal movies are very expansive throughout the cinematic universe. There's a subgenre of film that contains its own subgenres. Just like there are numerous classifications for animals, so too are there classifications for killer animal movies, ranging from convincing and believable to completely outlandishly ridiculous, making anybody who watches them idiots. And to keep you from asking me another stupid question, yes, I can make you an episode about this very topic. Stand by.
Episode rendering complete.
All right. Thanks a lot. Why is it wet? Okay, mates, it's time to explore the kingdom of killer animal movies. So sit back, relax, and make sure you're housebroken because it's time for today's adventure. Yo ho ho! Time for the show. Yarr!
The animal kingdom, a vast and almost infinite landscape of creatures great and small. Creatures that can be beautiful, fascinating, and downright scary. Yes, as beautiful and neato as it is, nature has the potential to be absolutely terrifying. And any creature, no matter how cute and cuddly it may be, can be very dangerous. Whether it be by physical harm to ourselves or our property, spreading disease, or just being plain icky, animals run the gamut of potential threats. For example, the Great Plague was caused by rats. More specifically, it was caused by the fleas that came with them. Mosquitoes spread malaria, one of the most dangerous diseases known to man. Parrots can sever fingers with their beaks of death. And the chances of being killed by a cow are low, but never zero. Those are just some examples. The animal kingdom is filled with reasons to be afraid. Deep down within the very cores of our being, we as humans are always very suspicious of animals. This is a primal fear that dates back all the way to when we were cavemen.
Excuse me, cave people?
Fine, cave people.
Back to when we were eating mammoths and wiping with rocks, animals were always lurking around the corner, waiting to hunt us down. And though they're not as much of a threat now as they were back then, animals are still rather dangerous. And by rather, I mean very. And this, of course, depends on where in the world you live. Like you could live in Australia, where everything can literally kill you. Animals all over the globe have always given us reasons to be aware of them, and the cinematic universe certainly taps in to this carnal fear. Yes, the world of horror movies has given us more than one reason to be a little bit suspicious of stuff like birds, frogs, and even rabbits. And it certainly seems like if there is an animal, there's going to be a horror movie about a killer version of said animal. And it could be said that no other animal is better represented in horror movies than dogs. And really, there's only one movie that comes to mind: Cujo, which was released in theaters August 12th, 1933. Oh, wait, I read that wrong. Sorry, 1983. And though this movie is certainly not the first killer animal flick, it helps solidify the premise into a subgenre of horror film. It's based on the 1981 Stephen King novel of the same name, and basically is one of those movies that made him a horror landscape mainstay. As you may or may not know, and by the way, this is one of those movies where you don't even have to see it to know what it's about. It's about a killer Saint Bernard, which is sort of an odd choice considering that St. Bernards are an incredibly gentle dog breed. Probably one of the most gentle in the world. I don't know, you'd have to look that up. I'm not, I don't have that kind of time, but still, it's not really convincing to have a killer St. Bernard. It should have been about a Jack Russell Terrier, because those things hate you. Well, as the story goes, he's not just a homicidal St. Bernard. No, he has rabies, which changes an animal's behavior massively. So Cujo is more like a cautionary tale about rabies. And by the way, did you know that if a human gets rabies, one of the conditions is night vision? Yeah, you can see in the dark. So sure, you have rabies, but you can see in the dark. So it's kind of like being a werewolf. But instead of changing into a werewolf, you just die. So anyways, not only is Cujo one of the best examples of a killer animal movie, it's also one of the most famous horror films. Why is that? Well, simply because there's a dog in it, and everybody loves dogs, even if that dog's a homicidal maniac. And you can certainly tell that by how well this did at the theaters. It was made on a budget of $6 million and took in $21 million at the box office. Hey, like I said, people love dogs. They love movies about dogs. They especially love movies about St. Bernards. For example, 1992's Beethoven was made on a budget of $18 million and took in $147 million at the box office. And then there's movies like 1989's K-9, which made $78 million at the box office, and that wasn't because of James Belushi. It's because it has a dog in it. And if your movie has a dog as the main character, that's almost always a surefire recipe for success. And horror movies are most certainly no exception, which is why Cujo is top dog amongst killer animal movies. And what makes Cujo really scary is the fact that this could actually happen. Hey, rabies is a big deal. It's always been a big deal, and it will continue to be. It can make any animal a bloodthirsty, homicidal, deranged psychopath, so, it's probably best to make sure your pets are up to date on their shots. Speaking of that, I'm working on my new movie, Raby Baby, which is like a mix between Baby's Day Out and Jason Takes Manhattan. Okay, enough of that. This is not an episode about rabies. It's an episode about killer animal movies, and it doesn't get any more killer animal movie-y than Cujo. Not only did this movie have a pretty luxurious time at the box office, it would also have a storied history on VHS. Warner Home Video took the reins on this one and issued the first VHS release in 1984 in their famous Warner Home Video clamshell. Warner would then release it again in 1987 in a normal cardboard sleeve. Republic Pictures Home Video would step up to the plate and release their own distribution in 1994. They would re-release basically this same distribution in 1997, and they would release it again in the year 2000 for the movie's final VHS distribution. And despite being the most recent distribution, this is the most rare. Yeah, not too many listings for this one, at least currently, and I'm guessing not a lot of people bought this based on the horrible cover art. I got Photoshop too, bro. The other VHS distributions seem to be pretty common. You can find multiple listings for each one. So Cujo is a household name and basically the most famous example of a killer animal movie. But there are plenty of examples, both before and after this film was released, of the killer animal concept. And today, we're going to take a look at the dark side of the animal kingdom and delve into a realm of the cinematic universe that taps into our primordial fear. So make sure all your shots are up to date, get the flea dip ready, and put down plenty of newspaper, because it's today's adventure,
The Kingdom of Killer Animal Movies.
So Cujo is the most well-known killer animal movie, but there are those that would say otherwise. There are those that would argue, and rightfully so, that Jaws is the most well-known killer animal movie. And honestly, I do agree that this 1975 classic film about a deep-sea fishing trip is the most well-known killer animal movie. But the concept of aquatic killer animals is pretty much its own thing, a subgenre within a subgenre, and it deserves its own episode. So, for the interest of time, I won't be discussing such films in this video. Instead, I'm going to stick with our feathered and furry fiends. That being said, for now, I'm going to stay in the doghouse and talk about another killer dog flick, Man's Best Friend, which was released in theaters November 19th, 1993, and was pretty much immediately forgotten about. Yeah, it wasn't until I was researching for this episode that I even remembered this movie existed. It didn't get a lot of press nor fanfare, which is surprising because it didn't do bad in theaters. It was made on a budget of $6 million and took in a box
office of almost 13 million, so, that's pretty good. And this movie is rather unique for a killer animal flick because it's not your standard killer animal flick. Because the dog doesn't have rabies, he's not evil or mean or anything like that. No, the dog is genetically and scientifically altered because he's basically a weapon. It's a scientific experiment gone awry. And you know what? It's a pretty fun movie, certainly deserves a rewatch, and certainly deserves to be talked about more than it is. Even its life on VHS was seemingly forgotten about and lackluster with no fanfare whatsoever. It only had one U.S. distribution, and that was in 1994 by New Line Home Video. And since this is pretty much a forgotten about movie, that must mean this VHS is rare and worth a lot of money, right? Oh man, not even hardly. Plenty of listings for it, and it's not exactly flying off the shelves. Moving on, the kingdom of killer animal movies has a real knack for honing in on our primal fears. And there is one animal in particular that's represented within this subgenre of film where the primal fear of is rather accurate. An animal that we as a species have been competing with ever since we started walking with erections. Oh, wait. That's way off. I meant walking erect. Sorry. An animal that we, as a species, have been prey and predator to. Predator to? No, not predator to. Predator. Oh, you know what I mean. Let me put it this way. An animal to whom which we have been both predator and prey and vice versa. And I'm talking about bears. And there are quite a few films that include a killer bear, at least to some degree, like The Great Outdoors, which is a comedy that just happens to have a killer bear in it. But perhaps it would be more accurate to talk about movies where the bear is the main antagonist and the focal point of the film, such as Night of the Grizzly, which was released in theaters April 20th, 1966. And maybe it's not entirely accurate to call this a killer animal flick because, well, a bunch of other stuff happens. And this movie's title is a bit misleading because while there is a bear in it, it's more of a side note. And it is more of a Western frontiersy kind of movie more than it is a killer animal flick. And it was well received by both audiences and critics. It's been described as heartwarming, tense, and scary. I would agree with that. And if you're wondering how the hell could anything be both heartwarming and scary, well, somehow this movie manages to do that. Even though this movie has a lot more going on in it than just a killer bear, it should still be on your list of killer animal flicks. And it is one of the first movies in this subgenre of film, and it's worth a watch. But again, the title is a bit misleading, though I suppose Night of the Grizzly sounds better than Night of the Grizzly and other various frontier shenanigans. It's a bit wordy, isn't it? Well, how about its life on VHS? How did that work out for it? Well, it looks like, oh no, not Paramount Home Video. And for those of you out there wondering about my curiously disproportionate disdain for Paramount Home Video, well, just know that Paramount Home Video is a pain in the ass. It all comes down to how they date their tapes. They throw out the years like bingo numbers. There'll be a year printed on the sleeve, only to have a completely different year printed on the cassette. And sometimes the sleeve will have 2 different years on it, as well as having a completely different year on the cassette. Highly unnecessary, and all it does is make it harder for a VHS collector to find a specific distribution. So yeah, Paramount Home Video would first release Night of the Grizzly on VHS in 1985, and then I'm sure they re-released it again about 1 billion times throughout the 90s. I personally would love to give you a more believable number on that, but Paramount Home Video just makes things way too difficult, and it takes the starch right out of my pants. In fact, you could say that Paramount Home Video is simply unbearable. So anyways, Night of the Grizzly is a killer animal flick, but barely. But there are other films that are strictly killer animal oriented that focus on bears. The best example of this is Grizzly, which was released in theaters May 16th, 1976, which is about a killer grizzly bear. And by the way, the bear in this movie is portrayed by Teddy, a Kodiak bear. Even though he's supposed to be a grizzly bear, he's not. He's a Kodiak bear, which are 2 different kinds of bears, and well, I guess they just thought nobody would notice, and I guess nobody did. Now, Grizzly, as a film, has oftentimes been considered a B-movie. One of these second-run flicks you take a date to go see, not to watch the movie, but just to make out. Whether or not that's true, that's neither here nor there. Let's let the numbers do the talking. It was made on a meager budget of $750,000, but took in $39 million at the box office. So either everyone was ready for a movie about a killer bear, or a lot of people just wanted to make out. Well, whatever you were doing while watching this film, you had another chance to do it in 1989 when Media Home Entertainment released it on VHS. If you wanted this little beauty for your VHS collection, what's it gonna run you? Are the prices unbearable? Well, that depends on where you look. On eBay, they're relatively cheap. They range from $3 to $40. But over on Mercari, or what is it? Mercari? Okay, whatever, this shopping site, which, by the way, I do not recommend looking for VHS on this site. Mercari is a haven for very high sellers, and I don't know, high being price or high because they're on drugs thinking this stuff goes for this much. But yeah, don't shop here. But let's check it out anyway for funsies. Oh look, you can get a copy for $40 with one of those damn SP stickers on it. Oh look, you can get a really shitty X-Rental copy for $18. And I mean, this is really shitty. Probably the worst X-Rental copy I've ever seen. Or you can get a slightly shitty normal version for $99. Your choice. Don't shop for VHS on Mercari. So Grizzly was rather successful, and being rather successful, it would of course enjoy a sequel. And this is where it gets a little weird. Grizzly 2, The Revenge, was finished production in 1983, but wouldn't be officially released until 2020. Sure, there were bootleg versions floating around, but that's not really the same thing, is it? Can you imagine going through all the trouble to make a movie only to have its release halted for 37 years? There appears to be various reasons as to why it was halted for so long, and I can't really get any clarification on any of them, so I'm just gonna move on. This movie's pretty interesting, not just for that, but look at the cast. Charlie Sheen, Laura Dern, John Rhys Davies, George Clooney. Interesting story behind its release. Great cast, but unfortunately there was no VHS release, so we're gonna move on. The kingdom of killer animal movies is pretty immense, and within that immense kingdom, the realm of killer bear movies is pretty damn big too. Because we also have 1977's Claws. And this is basically a ripoff of Jaws, and the production company pretty much admitted that. It's basically Jaws on land, but instead of a shark, it's a bear. Now, it would be really cool if it was a bear shark or a shark bear, but we'll talk about that later. Even the movie's name rhymes. Claws, Jaws, you get the idea. Claws was released on VHS by Video Gems in 1980... I don't know. It's one of these tapes that doesn't have the date on it. Oh, sure, it has 1977 on it, but that's when the movie was made, not when the VHS was released. So given that the packaging design is that of the coveted big box, I'm guessing this is either a 1980 or 1982. Maybe an 84 or an 85, or really any time between 1980 and 1987. This could be any of those. And if you want this for your VHS collection today, good luck, because there is currently only one listing, and it's some pretty steep mid-tier pricing. Which I guess isn't bad considering that this is actually pretty rare and the big box is in pretty decent shape, which is rather hard to find. Yes, big boxes are very easily damaged and it's difficult to find one in halfway decent condition. Now, it's important to note here that there was a 1982 television movie called Claws, and it was supposed to be about a mutated lynx that terrorizes a farm. Not a bad concept, especially for a television movie, but there's only one problem. Nothing really happens in this movie and everybody hates it. Yeah, like a Tootsie Roll in a litter box, this was buried pretty quickly, and strangely enough, it did get a VHS release in 1985 by World Video Pictures. And there's currently only one listing for this, which technically makes it rare, but nobody wants it. I mean, look at that asking price. That is the price of someone who just wants this thing out of their house. Okay, so dogs and bears as premises of killer animal movies are pretty believable, but how about lions? You got any lions? Yes, lions, a very believable concept for a killer animal movie, and only one movie comes to mind: The Ghost and the Darkness, which was released in theaters October 11th, 1996. And even though it sounds like an emo band, The Ghost and the Darkness proceeded to spoil everybody's safari plans, because this film features not one, but two murderous man-eating lions. Yep, they go on a super psychotic killing spree in Tsavo, Kenya, and the most frightening part is, this actually happened. It's based on a true story. Okay, it is a movie, so it was embellished a little bit, but apparently not much. So they were only lying a little bit.
Oh, we hate him.
And though this is more of an action-adventure kind of flick than it is a true horror movie, it's still a very fun watch and very damn tense. It was released on VHS in 1997 by, oh, give me a break, Paramount Home Video. I'll just forget it. Okay, so dogs, bears, lions, pretty obvious animals to feature in a killer animal movie, but how about some not-so-obvious animals? We'll talk about it when we come back. Don't let the dogs out just yet. The kingdom of killer animal movies will return after this. Mother's Day is right around the corner, so celebrate Mom with the best chicken in the business. Greasy, salty, good. Save the trouble, let Bagok's Chicken do the cooking. Bagok's Chicken celebrating 20 years of health code violations. Whoops, I meant health code commendations. Greasy, salty, good. Things alright for the picking. Down here at Bagok's Chicken. At Bagok's Chicken, celebrate Mom with the Mother's Day special. That's the big Mother Clucker Bucket. 20 pieces of your guess is as good as mine for $24.99. Greasy, salty, good! And what better way to say I love you than with a 10-pound brick of slop slaw. Only $5.99 with the purchase of any Big Mother Clucker Bucket. Now through Mother's Day at Bagok's Chicken. Things alright for the picking. Down here at Bagok's Chicken.
Attention, attention, stop what you're doing right now. If you've done anything in life, you might have been exposed to metagonic and you may be entitled to compensation. That's right, you. Yes, you. You may have been exposed to metagonic. If you have to ask what it is, you've probably been exposed to it. You're sick as shit, and you may be entitled to compensation. If you've done anything in life, you may have been exposed to metagonic. You. Yes, you. You watching this, you may have been exposed to metagonic and you may be entitled to compensation. Call the law offices of Dillon and Triceratops today. You may have been exposed to metagonic and you may be entitled to compensation. Call the law offices of Dillon and Triceratops today. That's 1-800-TRICERATOPS. That's 1-800-TRICERATOPS. You may have been exposed to metagonic and Dillon and Triceratops is here to help. Call today.
It's Fat Boy Surplus! Fat Boy Surplus! Husky Boys Irregular Clothing Outfitters! Fat Boy Surplus! Fat Boy Surplus! Specializing in closeouts, irregulars, factory buyouts, and unclaimed freight, which means bargains for you! Shop Fat Boy Surplus! Fat Boy Surplus! And get Mega Deal! Mega Deal! And get all the things that nobody else wanted! We're the region's largest distributor of Fat Boy sizes! Fat Boy sizes! Like Huskies, Cadets, and so fat! All irregular, all factory buyouts that your kid will absolutely not like wearing! They'll hate them, but you'll love them! So come on down and get Mega Deal! Mega Deal! On irregular, itchy, scratchy, overly starched, and hardly made jeans, only $4.99. Mega deal. And 3-sleeved skateboard dude or radical alien t-shirts in an assortment of colors, only $3.99. Mega deal. Then for a limited time only, get a 5-pack of fat socks, 2 for $5 or 5 for $2. Your choice. Mega deal. So shop Fat Boy Surplus. Fat Boy Surplus. Husky Boys Irregular Clothing Outfitters. And shop our new locations in Hamilton and Sharon Petersburg. It's Fat Boy Surplus. Fat Boy Surplus. Husky Boys Irregular Clothing Outfitters.
Hey there, folks, it's me, Little Vino. Did you your car up again? Maybe it's overheating because you never flushed your radiator. Did you even know you're supposed to do that? Or maybe your transmission's up because you didn't know your car was a stick shift and you drove with it in first gear for 10 damn miles. Or maybe you need some body work done because you up your rear end backing out of a parking spot by smashing into some other car because you couldn't see because of all the damn stickers on your rear window. Bunch of stickers that say Save the Whales and all these avant-garde speed metal bands that nobody's heard of. Well, it's too bad you don't put as much effort into driving as you do letting the world know how unique and different you are. Well, whatever your stupid-ass problem is, your car's up and I'm sure it's your fault. But I ain't here to judge. I'm just here to fix your car and serve you a nice cheesesteak while you wait. So come on down to Little Vino's Automotive Repair and Cheesesteak Emporium. We do all kinds of automotive repair and got lots of cheesesteaks. There's no job too small and no moron too stupid. We got the best cheesesteaks in the country in several locations to serve you better. So come on down, let me fix your up car and eat a nice cheesesteak. Just because you're a moron doesn't mean your taste buds are. Little Vino's Automotive Repair
And Cheesesteak Emporium.
Tighten up those flea collars. We now return to the kingdom of killer animal movies.
What are you up to now?
Well, I've changed my mind about my killer animal movie.
You're not doing a Killer Pet Rock movie now?
No, Fluffy was too dangerous to work with, and Little Creep found out that she had a bigger trailer than he did, so he got mad and stormed off set. So I'm going to do something else.
What are you going to do now?
I'm going to do a movie about killer sea monkeys. All I got to do is add this packet to a jar of water and just wait for them to grow.
Sea monkeys? Let me see that. Bloody hell, that's a packet of ramen noodle seasoning.
I was wondering why I said beef. Oh well. While I try to decide the next great killer animal movie, how about we get back to exploring actual ones? So, yo ho ho, back to the show.
Yarr.
Dogs, lions, and bears, oh my, might be believable and rather obvious choices for killer animal movies, but there are a few films in the subgenre that are neither of those. A good example of this would be Frogs, which was released in theaters March 10th, 1972, and is about well, a bunch of stuff actually. Yeah, much like The Night of the Grizzly, Frogs has a very misleading title, because frogs aren't the only killer animals featured in this movie. In fact, frogs are barely in it. Yeah, there's tarantulas, leeches, snakes, basically anything but frogs. But frogs. Frogs are in it, but not nearly enough to justify being the title of the film. This is totally an eco-horror flick, and I don't really know what else they were going to call it, but frogs just... I don't know, it's a bit deceiving. So if you're going to watch this thinking it's about killer frogs, and you totally should think that because it's called Frogs, then you're going to be pretty disappointed. But it's a fun watch, and you need to keep in mind that it's about many other vengeful varmints than just frogs. All that aside, it was first released on VHS in 1983 by Warner Home Video, in the classic Warner Home Video clamshell, of course. And Warner Home Video would release it again in 1988, but this time it's just in a normal cardboard sleeve. And somewhere along the way, Warner Home Video would sell off the distribution rights for this film to MGM Home Video, and they would release it on VHS in the year 2000 as part of their Midnight movie series. And if you wanted any of these distributions for your VHS collection today, just know that things can get a little froggy. Yeah, these are pretty hard to find. The 1983 Warner Home Video distribution currently only has one listing, and look at that price. There aren't any listings for the 1988 Warner Home Video distribution, and the 2000 MGM Home Video distribution currently only has two. Moving on, though Frogs isn't exactly about frogs entirely, the concept of killer frogs might be a bit unusual, but not as unusual as killer rabbits. And it's not a concept often broached in film, save for Monty Python's The Search for the Holy Grail and that one part in Summer School. Killer rabbits is not something you see a lot of. And there's a pretty good reason for that, because rabbits just aren't taken seriously as killer animals. But I should say that people who don't consider them dangerous are clearly people who have never been bitten by one, because it hurts. It hurts a lot, and they do have the potential to be dangerous, much like any other animal. However, making an entire movie about killer rabbits might need a little bit of embellishment. Embellishment in the form of not just rabbits, but giant rabbits. And though making them giant rabbits doesn't make the concept any less silly, that's exactly what we got with Night of the Lepus, which was released in theaters July 26, 1972, and proceeded to be one of the most ludicrous movies ever made. Okay, so God knows this movie gets its fair share of criticism, but let me say this. Look at this scene. Okay, this is rather laughable, right? Sure it is. But if you were to see this, in reality, you would shit your pants. Giant rabbits are rather laughable, and by rather, I mean very. But if there were such a thing as giant rabbits, it wouldn't be very funny. In fact, it would be quite terrifying. And that's what this film tried to portray, but it just didn't work. Either it didn't translate very well, or people are just never going to take killer rabbits seriously. It became a cult classic and one of those movies that's so bad it's good. So what's up with the name? What the hell is a lepus? Lepus is Latin for hare, and there's even a constellation called Lepus. I didn't know that. Did you know that? See, it looks like a rabbit. If you say so. Night of the Lepus is an interesting title, but why not just call it something like Rabbits? Well, it was going to be called simply Rabbits, but they changed it because they wanted a catchier and less obvious title. So even though it's a confusing name, Night of the Lepus is an accurate title. More so than Frogs or The Night of the Grizzly, and this movie might be silly, but at least it's about exactly what it says it's about. This film is based on The Year of the Angry Rabbits, a 1964 novel by Russell Braddon. Now, it's important to note here that this novel is a sci-fi horror black comedy, meaning that the concept was never meant to be taken seriously. And author Russell Braddon knew that giant killer rabbits were just inherently comedic. The fatal flaw of Night of the Lepus was the fact that they took it seriously and lost all comedic value. Yeah, they dropped all of the humor and tried to play it off as a straight-laced horror movie. The concept was just never going to be taken seriously. They would have done better if they would have kept the original premise and made it a horror comedy. But, oh well, I guess you could say I'm just splitting hairs.
Okay, you want to hear something weird? That's all I've been doing so far. Night of the Lepus never got a VHS release. In fact, it wasn't released on any kind of home media until 2005, and that was on DVD. I think that's very weird. I mean, movies like this are VHS fodder, and for this to not have a VHS release, it's just really strange. But it is what it is, and alas, all we can do is tarry not and move on from this. Rabbits are quiet, little unassuming creatures. You would have to make them giants in order to make them imposing. To make them threatening, you would have to make them outlandish. But there is one little unassuming quiet creature that you really don't have to do much to make them scary. And that is rats. Rats are small, but can be rather dangerous. They spread disease, and like I talked about in the beginning of this episode, they were indirectly responsible for the Black Plague. They can also be very destructive. They eat mostly anything, including flesh, if the situation so calls for it. But, on the other hand, they can also be very affectionate and loyal and make excellent pets. And these conflicting ends of the spectrum are highlighted in one film that's unlike any other, Willard, which was released in theaters February 26, 1971. And it's about killer rats. Well, more specifically, it's about a vengeful psychopath who controls them. Yes, deep within a kindred friendship, they do Willard's bidding, which makes this a very unique killer animal movie. And since a lot of people don't like rats, it succeeds in giving lots of people the heebie-jeebies, which is better than the heebie-bee-jees. Other than being a unique killer animal movie, this film has a lot of interesting factoids. For example, it stars Elsa Lanchester. Yes, the bride of Frankenstein herself is in this movie. Also, this film's production company was Bing Crosby Productions. I just didn't know that was even a thing. Would you say it's a Bing thing? Though I'm fairly certain that Bing Crosby had nothing to do with this film's production, it's still rather interesting that he's tied to this. Well, all Bing things and heebie-bee-jees aside, Willard was first released on VHS in 1985 by Prism Entertainment. It would be released again in 1989 by Prism Entertainment in association with, oh no, not Paramount Home Video. Yep, sorry folks, we're gonna move on. Willard would enjoy a sequel with Ben, which was released in theaters June 23rd, 1972. Though mildly different, this film still involves an army of killer rats, but it also has the inclusion of a theme song performed by Michael Jackson. Yes, that's absolutely true. And like Willard, Ben is also a Bing thing, with Bing Crosby Productions being its production company. And also, like Willard, it would be released on VHS by Prism Entertainment in association with Paramount Home Video. Oh, God, I'm not talking about this. Willard would enjoy a remake in 2003 and stars Crispin Glover in a role that seems to be tailor-made for him. Unlike the original film, this version of Willard would have nothing to do with Paramount Home Video, making its VHS distribution easier and more enjoyable to discuss. It was released in 2003 by New Line Home Video. See how easy that was? Cut and dry, one distribution, 1 year, not 1 year printed on the tape, 1 year printed on the sleeve. Nope, 1 year, and that's it. That's easy. I love it. Since it is a 2003 release, it makes it a latter era VHS, and those can be pretty tricky to find. For more details on that, check out the Captain Adams VHS Pirate Ship adventure, Eras of an Empire. Though that theorem isn't always the case, and it's certainly not the case for this VHS. Look at this. Plenty of listings, very cheap prices, not rare at all. Moving forward, and since we're talking about killer rats, you at this time may be wondering if I'm going to be discussing the 1976 film Food of the Gods, which does feature killer rats as well as other killer animals, and the short answer is no, I won't be. Why not? Well, this story in this movie feature killer animals, yes, but these killer animals are mutated. And you know what? I gotta draw the line somewhere. Mutated animals, though interesting, do not make for a true and pure killer animal movie. And before you say anything, yes, I know that the rabbits featured in Night of the Lepus are made giant due to a mutation, making they themselves mutants. Is it Lepus or Lepus? Whatever the correct pronunciation is, that movie is the exception to the rule because, well, it's the only movie about killer rabbits, and you gotta talk about that. And talk about it, we did. But now we must move forward. Earlier in the show, I had mentioned that Cujo and Jaws are pretty much tied for number one for being the most well-known killer animal movie. But there is a movie that predates both of those films by a wide margin and is highly regarded as the grandfather of all killer animal movies. A movie that taught us that when looking for killer animals, always look up and look out. And I, of course, am talking about Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, which was released in theaters March 28, 1963, and proceeded to make all of us a little bit more suspicious of our feathered friends. And this movie is rather special because it doesn't just focus on one animal being a killer or even simply a couple of them. No, it focuses on an entire classification of animals being rather angry with us. Yes, it engages the premise of every single bird on the planet hating us all at once. That premise is absolutely terrifying and the stuff of nightmares, and this movie delivers perfectly well on that. Every bird on the planet wanting us dead. Let's put that into a bit of perspective. Though it's rather impossible to count every single bird on the planet, there is an estimation of anywhere between 50 billion and 430 billion birds currently on the planet. That's an awful lot of things to want you dead. That's a menacing notion, and for those of you out there who don't understand how birds can be scary, well, all I can say is that you clearly never tried to feed seagulls on the beach, because that can go south real quick. Oh, they're everywhere! This film is adapted from a story of the same name by novelist Daphne Sticklebats. I'll let this guy say it.
Daphne du Maurier.
Daphne du Maurier, of course. Thanks. And this story is highly regarded as one of the greatest pieces of horror fiction. Fiction, or is it? No, don't be silly. Of course it is. But for some reason, this concept really hits home for a lot of people. And the premise, for some reason, is very believable, making the story even more scary. Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds is just one of those movies that you certainly remember. And the VHS landscape would remember it as well. And it should come to a surprise to absolutely no one that this movie was released on VHS like a billion times. Okay, maybe more like 4 times. But rest assured that Paramount Home Video had nothing to do with this one. Yep, this was a Universal Pictures production, and they had their talons all over this one as they flocked to release it on VHS. They would first release it in 1985 under their MCA Home Video moniker. They would release it again in 1991 as MCA Universal Home Video, and then they would release it again in 1995 as part of an Alfred Hitchcock collection. And then they would release it one final time as part of another Alfred Hitchcock collection in 1999. And all of these distributions are very easy to find today, even the first distribution. So, The Birds was a very successful movie, and it continues to be. And that being the case, of course, there would be a completely unnecessary sequel released many years after. And that is what we got with The Birds 2. Land's End. And to add insult to injury, this was a made-for-TV movie, which doesn't always mean bad, but in this case it does. This first aired on March 14th, 1994, and just made everybody angry. Universally panned as being horrible, poorly acted crap that has no point whatsoever. It's a sequel that absolutely does not need to exist and that nobody asked for. And speaking of stuff that nobody asked for, this will be released on VHS in 1994 by MCA Universal Home Video. I'm sure they're proud of that one, and it would be released again in 1997 by Good Times Home Video. Are these rare? Do they go for a lot of money today? No. Yeah, there's certainly nothing to crow about. Oh, man, yeah. They had a lot of gall releasing this movie. Okay, so it would seem that birds would not be the only winged marauders to menace mankind. There is another reason to look to the skies with dread, and that is bats. Yes, these furry and flapping flying mammals give some people quite a fright, and the Kingdom of Killer Animal Movies would try its best to capitalize on that fear. Well, maybe try its best isn't entirely accurate, but we at least received an attempt with the film Bats, which was released in theaters. Wait, this was released in theaters? Okay, it was released in theaters October 22nd, 1999, and it proceeded to scare people to... No, it didn't, actually. This movie is regarded as being not scary whatsoever. Yes, Bats, as a horror movie, doesn't exactly press any buttons, but it was good to see Lou Diamond Phillips again. Yeah, seriously, where the hell's he been? Bats is about... Well, it's about bats, but more specifically, it's about bats that were part of a government experiment, and technically they're mutants. Which means it's not a true and pure killer animal movie, so I'm going to move on. There was another movie about bats with 2005's Vampire Bats, which stars Lucy Lawless, and it's about vampire bats. But again, They're mutated, and more to the point, this never had a VHS. This went right to DVD, so I don't know why I'm even talking about it. And yes, I know, Night of the Lepus was about mutated animals, and it also never had a VHS either, so why did I talk about that? Well, again, it's because it's the only movie about killer rabbits, and you simply have to talk about that. Yeah, killer rabbits aren't exactly a common thing, but movies about killer bats sort of were. A good example of this, and a movie that's a pure and true killer animal flick, would be 1979's Nightwing. This film is about a group of highly aggressive vampire bats that quite literally bleed the town dry. In fact, you could say that this movie sucks. Nightwing is one of those movies that goes relatively unnoticed. In fact, you could say it flies under everyone's radar.
That's it.
Oh,
Get
no,
out.
don't. Nightwing is a sort of forgotten about movie, but the realm of VHS did not forget about it, and it had a rather large distributor for its VHS. Yes, RCA Columbia TriStar Home Video would take the reins on this one and would first release it in 1985. They would release it again 10 years later in 1995, and both of these distributions are sort of easy to find, but the prices may vary. Okay, so far we've talked about movies encompassing killer dogs, bears, lions, rabbits, rats, birds, and in the case of the movie Frogs, killer tarantulas, leeches, butterflies, lizards, turtles, snakes, and oh yeah, frogs. But what if there was a killer animal movie where they couldn't decide on what animal to use and just said, screw it, we're gonna do them all? Well, you're in luck because there is, with The Day of the Animals, which was released in theaters May 13th, 1977. And it's about all the animals in the entire world turning on mankind. Think of it as Maximum Overdrive, but with animals, and Leslie Nielsen. Okay, well, if you've seen this movie, then you know it's not exactly like that. But Leslie Nielsen is in it. It's not all the animals in the entire world. It's only some animals at a certain elevation, and they're driven mad because of the depletion of the ozone layer, and stuff like that. I don't know. It's a pretty specific plot, and it's totally an eco-horror flick. And it's also, quite literally, the epitome of a killer animal movie, because there's all kinds of stuff in this one. Yeah, there's dogs, bears, snakes, wolves, hawks. I mean, you name it, it's in this movie. Okay, maybe that last wee bit isn't exactly true, but this killer animal movie is pretty well loaded. Yep, loaded indeed. And if you're looking for killer animal movies, then really look no further than Day of the Animals. It's jam-packed with killer animals, and Leslie Nielsen, but not just any Leslie Nielsen, a shirtless, batshit crazy Leslie Nielsen.
You lily-livered punk! I'm running this camping trip!
Though this film may be pretty well loaded, its life on VHS, however, was not, as it had only one VHS distribution in 1982 by Media Home Entertainment. And I'll tell you what else isn't loaded, and that's the current listings for this. Yeah, there's not that many, but the prices aren't that bad. Moving on, as it's been well established in this adventure, the Kingdom of Killer Animal Movies has quite the knack for honing in on primal fear. And one sure way to make people afraid of your movie is to make it about snakes, because there are a lot of people who don't like snakes. And though snakes are featured in both Frogs and The Day of the Animals, there are a few movies that feature snakes as the main and primary antagonist. Actually, there are a lot of movies about snakes. However, most of them are about mutant snakes. So, you know my rule, we're not going to be talking about those. But there are some that are just about normal, everyday snakes with maybe some psychological problems. But who doesn't have those, right? For example, there's 1974's The Killer Snakes, which is essentially Willard, but with snakes. And this wouldn't be released on VHS until 1996 by Something Weird Home Video. And this is so rare nowadays that it basically doesn't exist. And then there's 1972's Stanley, which is pretty much a vigilante flick, but instead of guns or swords, the guy uses his pet rattlesnakes. Totally normal thing to do. And this would have numerous VHS distributions, one of them being in 1986 by Vid America Incorporated, with cover art that looks like it should be on a carnival ride. Another being from 1989 from United American Video, with cover art that looks like it's from the same ride. And then there's Rattlers from 1976, which is about a bunch of rattlesnakes that are driven mad from nerve gas. And this would only have one US VHS distribution in 1985 by USA Home Video in their famous big box design. And if you want this for your VHS collection today, too bad! There is currently no listings for it. And then there's 1981's Venom, which is about a black mamba snake that's loosed in an apartment complex where police are trying to rescue a kidnapped girl from German terrorists. Long story. And who hasn't been there before, am I right? And this too would only have one US VHS distribution, which was in 1983 by Vestron Video. And then there's 1997's Anaconda, which stars Jennifer Lopez, and that's all I want to say about that. And on that note, I think I'll start to wrap things up. In closing, the Kingdom of Killer Animal Movies occupies a large expanse within the cinematic landscape, an expanse that becomes even larger if you include all of its different aspects, because it's a subgenre of film that has its own subgenres. There's pure and true killer animal movies, in which we've talked about today, but then there's also mutated killer animals, which I refuse to include but hinted at. And then, of course, there's aquatic killer animal movies, which I also refuse to include but also hinted at. And then there's killer insect and arachnid movies, which I neither refused nor hinted at because I forgot to. Including all these different subgenres within a subgenre would just make the video way too long, and you wouldn't watch that, and I wouldn't expect you to. You gotta have guidelines when discussing this kind of stuff, or else it all just descends into chaos. Well, that being said, I hope you enjoyed this adventure, and please hit subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and take care out there, and I'll see you next time, only on Captain Adam's VHS Pirate Ship.